Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Open Mic Stage event. I'm your host, Joshua Toback, and I'm joined by the ever-talented Tom Schalk. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hi, I'm doing really good, and thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. I'm really excited for this one. I've wanted to talk with you for a little while about voiceovers, so this is really exciting for me. So, hell yeah, let's get right into it. So,
Hell yeah.
I feel like I start every interview with the same question when it comes to voice actors, but how'd you get your start? Tell us your story of how you kind of got to where you are now.
I want to say that the journey began in like 2011, that senior year of my high school, because that's around there I made the decision I wanted to pursue it because I already had an affinity for creative arts. I wanted to like invest in film at the time more. And people in my school would be like, "Hey, you should be an announcer, like on the speakers. You should be an announcer." That was the word that was applied to me. But I figured, you maybe I should. I would have fun. I would like to be in cartoons or something. That would be great. So I remember, I think as part of a gift for graduation, I forget how it came to, it might have been Christmas, but I got a USB condenser mic, specifically the Samsung C03U, which I
Mm,
still use on my desk. I'm using actually my booth mic right now just because it's nice and quiet. But
mm.
but I have that first mic still on my desk, and use it for like Discord calls. Um, so it's pretty funny how it's been around. It's like it's my little reminder of like where things began. But yeah, I would start there, and my way of practicing and getting myself familiar was honestly just making little bits. Like I would open up Audacity and just make conversations with random characters I make up. Just because I thought that'd be, I like the idea of like creating characters and exploring character reactions and stuff like that. Um, and that's how and as somebody who wanted to make content, it gave me ideas for projects I would eventually make. Like one such bit I was doing in one of those sessions, I just had two Pokemon talk to each other, and then I released the Blastoise versus Charizard video, which was one of the first times anything of mine ever like took off on
Mm.
YouTube. And I was really happy about that, and that people got a kick out of that. But yeah, like I just liked the idea of, having a venue for imagination. So voice acting always felt like that means to that end. But I also just really like doing it. So as I got more familiar, I want to say like maybe around 2018, 2019 is where I started to get bigger work. Because before then I was on like Fiverr, and I was reaching out to independent people just because I wanted to be a part of something. And then I
Mhm.
started getting into bigger and bigger projects, independent games and bigger games than that. A lot of games, a couple animation stuff, and since like 2020, about I started booking more commercial stuff, and that's um, that's sort of the bread and butter for voiceover in general,
Mhm.
and that's where I've been trying to like definitely push for getting an agent in that area. But in the meantime, what really got me to where I am is a lot of investing in the craft itself. I took coaches and classes, and I even in my city, I'm from New York, so I would go into Manhattan and I went to the working actor studio for I want to say a year, maybe longer. I can't remember if it was 2 years or one, but for a bit of a while, I took a course that both analyzed voiceover and theater monologues. And I want to say that the amount of skill I built in analyzing monologues for theater plays, um, my skill, I feel like, as being able to tap into acting, exponentially grew because those same skills transfer to wherever you go. I felt like I gained a lot of confidence and a lot of insight on how the body would work in terms of summoning reactions
Mm.
and summoning feelings that create the sound and the feel and the look of somebody reacting in a situation, because really you're in that's when it comes to voiceover, as with most stuff, it's you reacting to something and putting yourself in the space to react and make things feel natural is something I always pursued. And I honestly, what keeps me driven is the challenge of keeping things real like that, or trying to reach that realism, especially for characters where you're nothing like the person you're voicing, but you put yourself in a place where you can try and identify who you're portraying,
Mhm.
or bring, whether it's personal experiences or creatively putting yourself in a place of how can I relate to this character, and and making something out of it, fill in the pieces with parts of yourself, or just being imaginative and and pretending to be that other person. It's a lot of fun, and I also find it challenging when I have a thing that pushes me like that. I just always loved making something from nothing, I guess.
Hmm. So you really enjoy the thrill of the challenge of kind of just entering a character's shoes, or maybe entering the shoes of a situation, whether it's commercial work or character work. Um, I'd like to actually pivot back to commercial work as someone who's trying to just kind of figure out their commercial voice. How did you find your commercial voice?
It's really just my voice. One of the things that I'm told when I go into commercial work is that a lot of the time they just want your voice. They want a normal, natural sounding voice. More often than not, the voice that I use for commercial is my own. I don't put
Mm,
on an act or anything. Maybe there'll be a commercial that has characters and I get to play it up a bit. I've done voice matches for certain celebrities on. Uh, I don't think any commercial that actually made it to air, but there was like some storyboarded commercials that you can be brought on to not necessarily do the commercial's voice, but do the voiceover for the storyboard, so they could present it as an idea for one.
mm,
And they'll say like, oh, if we want to hire this actor, let's get somebody who sounds like him so we could show it off before we hire the actual actor. And in those cases, I did one, like one guy I think it was like Eugene Levy. I had to sound like him from Schitt's Creek and something like that. And I did a little something. So
oh,
like aside from like voice matches and characters, it's finding that voice. The commercial's a different beast from character work in general, because it's kind of and you probably heard that joke about having to sound conversational and normal, and yet it doesn't feel like it, because
mhm,
there's a very particular way you hit the beats. Punctuation, depending on the script, does matter. Where you put your emphasis on certain words does matter. So creating something natural out of that while
mhm,
also adhering to the rules of commercial voiceover takes a lot of understanding of subtext and uh, like, just of the rhythm. So one of the things they always tell you is listen to commercials, listen to ads to get an idea of how things sound. Just for comparison's sake, like, okay, these are the kind of ways that they try to sell you the product. Emphasizing, a certain brightness, and you have a smile when you talk about the product itself. So it's like it's a happy, very good solution. And depending on the thing, maybe it's more serious. If it's a bank, maybe they're trying to be more authoritative and show you like your money is safe with us. Or if it's like the new item at McDonald's, yeah, you emphasize like how it makes you feel real good. And it's so delicious, and yeah, in a way, it's all the same principles of acting, but like you walk a certain tightrope of knowing how to sell while also making it natural. And it's one
mhm.
of the hardest things I've had to do yet as far as voiceover is get that balance right. And it keeps me pushing. It really does.
Mhm. I love the idea of the challenge of kind of balancing being natural and also selling something. I really love that idea because you don't want someone to sell you something. You want to be like, you almost want it subconscious, right? So I feel like that's really fun about commercial work, and I'm excited to kind of delve more into that in the future. So you mentioned earlier some of your content that you've made, the kind of how you got started, basically creating voices and having them converse with each other. Where did that come from for you? Like, where does your content that you make today, for example, some of the posts you make on Twitter or whether the posts you make on YouTube, where does that content kind of come from you?
Like, do you mean in general, like how do I what my process for making them is, or
Yeah,
what is the route that
what's
made?
your process basically is like what's your creative process when it comes to kind of creating original content?
I swear to God, sometimes I'm just sitting on the toilet, and I think to myself, wouldn't it be funny if this happened? And then I just go and do. I swear to God, sometimes it's that simple, and sometimes what'll usually happen is maybe I'll have like it'll be like a line of something. I'll just imagine somebody saying something funny. I'd be like, that might be funny. How can I make that real? I talk about
Mhm.
making things real, because I'll think of it and it won't be real until I put it out there. I'm like, how can I make this work and make it real? And
Mhm.
then I just sometimes it's driven by the hyper focus of ADHD. If an idea seems really good, or I feel like this one's got potential, I feel like this is gonna make somebody laugh, I just kind of ride that wave and I just go right into it. My creative process in general is um if there might be certain ideas that I have like more layers to, and I'll open a Google Doc and I'll write it down. And sometimes it may be sitting there for a long while, and then I'll come back to it, and then just have like a rush of like ideas right then and there. I've been trying to organize myself better and commit more to ideas when I come up with them.
Mm.
But like a recent example, I made a Transformers parody, and I brought on Solid JJ to voice a few of the characters as well. And
Great guy. Great guy.
great guy. He's super funny. And just recently he released a Transformers parody, and I was a voice on his. I
Mm.
uh, I made one Transformers based. I was Optimus Prime, and he was Cliff Jumper and a couple of other guys. And then he made one, and then I came back as Optimus Prime for that, and also Megatron on both of them.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, no, like that first Transformers one, I wrote a script. I made it very loose. I just imagine, I kind of treat it almost like, instead of like reading out loud, I'll just type, almost like stream of consciousness. Think like imagining the conversation as it went. No matter what fell on the page, it would fall on, and then maybe I'd go back and tweak things and edit and cut out the fat that's not needed, and then I polish it into an actual script format, and then I maybe in that particular case, I brought on JJ, and I directed him and recorded my lines at the same time, so we had them. If I needed
Mm.
re-records on myself, I would do that. I don't remember if I asked him for re-records. I think he was good to go, but like if I ever did, I would probably do that. Then I get to the editing stage, and then it goes from there. I just remember too, with the memes I sometimes post. Sometimes if I really want to put good craft into it, and if I was like, say it's like a prelay of not necessarily a prelay, but if it involves clips of say like a Dragon Ball meme,
Mm.
I would line them up and I would record on whatever mic is nearest to me. Maybe it's like a really crappy mic. And I would record just the placement of them, and then just so I had it lined up, and maybe I'd put in the sound effects after I put them into like Adobe Premiere. Then I go to my booth, record the lines proper on a good mic like this one, and then I drop them into the project so that way they're lined up, and then I can just play with whatever's there. Then do all my
Oh.
sound design, equalize and compress sound effects so nothing like bleeds on
Mm.
each other. Um, so that's generally with my own content. It's very free form. Sometimes some things come first before another, but I take it in steps, and I try to make it as easy as possible for me to keep myself motivated, and that usually involves having the goals laid out in simple enough steps so I don't feel overwhelmed. Like if
Mm.
I'm making something and involves my voice, just putting in a little basic something just so it's there, so I can line up everything else and then come back to it with an actual voiceover, stuff like that. With professional like inquiries, my process is much more rigid. It's much more tight because I'm working for somebody else, and I don't want to
Mm.
keep them hanging. So I'll have written out um, the particular goals of what I do. Like I do sound design along with the voiceover work, and if I'm doing sound design for a certain animation, and I see like what the animation is, I'll look at the whole thing and have a notepad, and I'll write down all the sound effects I could hear happening in there. Then I'd after I listen to a couple times and think of everything, I lay down all the sounds I could find that I have in my bank. I have a big bank of tons and tons of sound effects I've collected over the years, either through packs I've bought or ones I found in the wilderness that are royalty free.
Mm.
And yeah, I try to. I took it upon myself. I live by the notion of taking things one step at a time, because if you
Mm.
take it on five things at once, it's going to overwhelm me, and it might overwhelm people in general to do things all at once. But especially with attention deficit disorder, having things ADHD, having things organized into small goals, you see the progress, you see things moving, and that helps motivate the momentum
Mm.
of whatever project I'm working on, be it something for myself or for somebody else.
That's very relatable as someone also with ADHD. Um,
Hell yeah. Welcome to
ve-
the club.
yeah, I just recently got diagnosed actually, which is very surprising for me. But
Really?
yeah, I went like 25 years without being diagnosed, so I totally understand that.
Looking back, do you see anything that might have given it away?
I think for me, I lose interest in things very quickly. Like I'll just like if like I I just kind of
I
just
know
like
what you mean.
I
Yeah.
I'm working on something. I'm like I don't want to do this, anymore.
There's a lot of projects out like I want to do this, but then it's either you forget about it or you're like, this ain't good. Let me come back to it later, and you just don't come back to it. It's one of those.
Yeah, I think that was
One of
why
those
Eden
more
is
than one
such
I
a
met.
big thing for me. It was basically just kind of my first thing, and I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. I'm gonna have a team to help me do it. I'm gonna hold myself accountable so I get it out at a certain time. So I really relate to that feeling of just kind of like, all right, I gotta lock in. I gotta get around this ADHD and really lock in. I do want to actually comment on something you said at the beginning of that question. Basically, you just kind of sitting on the toilet and being like, huh, this would be funny. So I do want to kind of follow up with that and ask, there's a thing I like to bring up with every single person I interview. It's called the cringe barrier. Have you heard of this? Do you know what this is?
I don't know what you mean by the cringe
So the
barrier.
cringe barrier is basically you going back and looking at something you work on or hearing something you record and kind of going, ugh, I don't like that. How do you
Oh,
get over that kind of feeling of just like, ugh?
I don't really. I mean, I'll look at my old stuff and be like, oh yeah, that's definitely older me. Um, I guess the way I get over is just accept that it is over. Like that was
Mm,
me at one point, and I'm at a different point. Like if I found an old file where I'm like, I'm better now than I was then. I look at it as an achievement. Like I was here, and as time passed by, I got more comfortable with myself. I learned more, and I'm able to do better. It's a reference point. I even made like a little clip not so long ago. There was one of the bits that I recorded just for fun on my computer was like it was like a Star Wars stormtroopers were being yelled at for missing their shots all the time, and then I re-recorded it like 10 years after I had made it. Like it was a bit I made in 2010, and then I redid the bit in 2020 just to show, I guess, to show people that like, oh, like this is how far I've come, but also to show myself how far I've come
mm,
as far as a performer, as far as a writer, because I'll tweak the words as well, and just for the hell of it. So I don't really cringe at my old stuff because it's just a different time. And even
mm,
and like if I was gonna cringe at anything, it might have been something like maybe I made one of those bits and either it wasn't that funny or it didn't age well, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I can't believe I thought that was funny. But again, I
mm,
just accept it for it's a time capsule. There's nothing to cringe about because it's just what was.
mm,
I know where I come from and I know where I am now,
mm,
and I don't worry too much about that because I know who I am now and
mm,
what I find useful now, what I find funny now, and how I can improve myself
mm.
further.
I think to follow up on that, because you have, I believe you have a ton of confidence in yourself, and I think that's fantastic. I love talking to people who basically are like, this is me, this is what I'm doing, and I'm not going to let anyone stop me. How do you kind of get to that point where you're just like, this is what I'm doing, and I fully believe in it, and I'm not going to let anyone, even myself, stop me?
It's an interesting question because I don't know. I always feel like there's something worth fighting for.
Hmm.
I feel like if in general I'd have more issues um with I guess the things I'd have struggled with in my life don't necessarily involve my work. I've always cherished the achievements that I've had and also valued the lessons I learned in it, and I feel like I've gotten better over the years with that. And it really what helped my work is investing in my general life
Hmm.
and experiencing life and having um, confidence there whenever possible. And like anybody, there are moments where I have lacking confidence um, in certain situations, and then the way I picked myself up there and kept moving forward, even if I feel like I got hit, I I just apply it to anything else, like my work.
Hmm.
I don't let anything slow me down because I kind of live by the principle that no matter what happens, I'm going to get back up again.
Hmm. That's fantastic. I really, really appreciate that because I think living life is the best way to avoid being afraid of life. I feel, at least that's how I feel. Because having life experiences to kind of draw on whether you're acting or whether you're just living, I think is just fantastic. I firmly believe in that. So I want to kind of circle around to what you mentioned earlier about one of your videos kind of blowing up. So you've had experience of going viral on several occasions. So walk me through that process of how it feels to kind of just like really have a clip or whether a video blow up, and kind of what are the expectations on you for basically a follow up, or what's it like kind of that whole process?
So one of the first times I blew up was a series I called Pokebuds, and there's only like 2 episodes, and it got really hard to keep animating. And I guess at the time I was a bit of perfectionist with investing in like the lore of things because I like Pokemon, but I didn't know a lot about Pokemon the way
Hmm.
that a lot of people do now. Because there's like several generations now, and I feel like a geezer only really known like the most about the first one or three. But I played X and Y a couple years ago back in college, but yeah, so like that when the first one blew up, it was just kind of like I was experimenting a lot with Source Filmmaker
Hmm.
and just animating there. I just was having fun, and I figured, oh, this is really neat. I wasn't like a notable animator in that regard, but I just liked the idea of that being a medium to telling certain stories or bits. And I had that file laying around of just an edit I did of Pokebuds, where the original is them because the original joke of the video is Blastoise and Charizard fight is the name of the video. And it's a thumbnail of Charizard swooping into attack Blastoise. But when you watch the video, they're just having an argument. They're just arguing like two dudes because they're fighting. They're fighting over something stupid, and it's very heavily influenced by the banter that me and my brother. Growing up with brothers, we would argue about some of the dumbest shit ever,
Hmm.
and that's just the way that we would tackle things in there definitely helped to create the dynamic that they had there. So it was just funny having them argue as if they were brothers that are always on top of each other. And it was just a fun bit. It was as an exercise of source filmmaker, and it was an exercise of my general editing and voice work. And then that took up a lot of views, and it eventually got to like 1 million. I'm like, oh my god, that's crazy. That's awesome. Like at first I was ecstatic. I put things out thinking they might be funny and stuff like that, but I didn't know anything. It helped that it was a recognizable property, and I guess it's relatively. There's not a lot of things like that out there.
Hmm.
I honestly, I think you asked something about like where it kind of all began. I remember being a kid playing Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64, and every time the Pokemon would come up, I would just make up voices for them. So
Mm.
when Blastoise comes up, I'd be like, yeah, "I got you this time," and just voice them, almost like they were action figures on the TV. There's giving them voices and giving them like banter, like they're '90s cartoon characters, which they were at the time. Um, and it just kind of came full circle because I like the idea of anthropomorphizing and giving animals things to say. So Pokemon are just a really fun way to explore that. So I just had them banter on there, and it blew up. I made another one, and that was fun. And it all takes a decent amount of time because I'm not like an animator by trade, but I just needed to make it happen.
Hmm.
So those got a lot of attention. I was really happy with it. I was just happy people liked it. The original stress I had at the time is, can I monetize it because it's Pokemon? I left it unmonetized, and people asked like, why didn't you monetize it? Because at the time I don't know if it'll get pulled because of the fact that it's Pokemon, it's copyright. I didn't want to risk it. I think at this point you're able to probably people have done stuff with Pokemon and still monetize. I don't know.
You don't want to mess with
Um,
Nintendo. I totally get that.
yeah, it was tricky. It was definitely tricky, especially at the time because I just got a bunch of views, and if I monetized it and then it like got ripped off, then all that's gone. It's like, damn, I have nothing to prove now, you know?
Hmm.
So stuff. So this achievement like that showed that I had the potential to reach people in a certain way with stuff that I find funny. Because it really comes down to half the time I'm just putting out stuff I just think is funny that I think people might get a laugh at. But honestly, if nothing happens, I put out something that's funny. Some of the stuff I'll put a lot of effort into will get like maybe 5K videos, and something where I'm just like, oh, I'll slap it again and put it out. That's the thing that'll blow up. It's the craziest thing. It's super funny. I've given up trying to understand algorithms. That's why I don't
Hmm.
approach it with any particular um insight. I just if I find it funny, I just put it out.
That's fantastic.
Um
Yeah, that I get that. I think my most viral video was a JoJo edit of Cyberpunk I did in like 5 seconds. So I totally get not knowing the algorithm at all. Um,
especially with
Mhm.
the Skullboy video on TikTok. Like that one blew up. I didn't even put it on TikTok. Somebody ripped it from it was probably Twitter because it blew up on my Twitter, but somebody took that video, put it on TikTok, and that blew up. By the time that's what got me on TikTok was so I could be like, oh, I want people to see it from me. By the time I put it up, people had already seen it and shared it, so that one didn't get as many views. But people at this point, I think, know that it's me. So usually if
Mhm.
that pops up, people will tag me, they'll share it, and I do appreciate that. Honestly, I'm just happy people get a kick out of it. I do watermark all my videos since
Very
then, though.
smart. Very smart. I think that was my first exposure to you, actually, the Skullboy video. God, was that
Oh yeah,
how far back was that now? It was like what, 2016?
2019.
2019.
2019. Yeah,
Wow.
because I was still working at the store that was in. Um, and then the pandemic happened, and that's when TikTok really blew up because everyone was inside and we were just watching TikToks, and
Mhm.
that definitely helped that get around too.
Wow. I had no idea you were working at that store. I thought you were just like at like a store one day and just thought that'd be funny.
I worked at a store and I was thinking about that entire situation for like 2 weeks leading up to it because the other guy in the video, he's my buddy, and he and I would always uh, um, just kind of like make each other laugh during work. So I had this idea of like running up to him with this joke, and it didn't matter what the joke was. I googled it like maybe like a couple of nights before. I forget exactly how it did. The point was just because we knew how to push each other's buttons. So I just needed to find it and eat, like, because usually for Halloween, you have to, and that kind of party store, you have to get up really early.
Mhm.
So no one was around. So I waited for something like that. So I ran over. I pretty much did it in like one shot. So it was completely all natural. And part of the reason why the video, I think, worked so well is because like I think we understood each other's way of talking and trying to make each other laugh. And he's a very charming fella. So
Mm. I just remember him saying like bones, and then you just kind of zooming into the camera. Like there was like you have a very keen sense of like what can make something funny, and I think a lot of people appreciated that. So kudos for
I
that for
appreciate
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. I know I do appreciate that. I remember the time just thinking like it's I don't know like I try to think about rhythm in terms of editing as best as I can. Did you know that I think I posted this a long while ago, but the sound of him banging against the cartboard is not from the original video.
Really?
I edited that in because it was just like a boom, boom. It was just like a basic thud. So I found files on my computer that sound like a harder smack, and I edited them into the video to give it more of that impact. Um,
Mhm.
because I thought it would sound funnier if it had more of an impact. I didn't at the time. I didn't know if it had an impact or not.
Mhm.
I thought it would have been louder, but I made it louder. So
That's I say fantastic a lot, but that is really awesome. Just having that keen sense of just like what can make this funnier. I think that's such a natural thing that a lot of people don't have. So just kind of having that sense of like, oh, this would put it a little over the edge, or this would make me laugh harder. So if this makes me laugh harder, maybe it'll make other people laugh harder. So
that's
having
that's
that,
the hope I have is that
mhm,
people see what I'm seeing, and I take the risk of showing it because like I thought it was funny. Hopefully somebody does too.
mhm. So I have another voiceover related question, and then one more after that. So you've obviously been auditioning for a very long time. Basically, you've been in the industry for a fair bit now. What's your favorite lesson you've learned from an audition that you didn't book? Basically, one that you just kind of said, "Huh, that's interesting," and then you kind of like took something from that audition.
I feel like I learned from an audition I did book because there were multiple characters and there was a couple where I was like, I think I could do really good with these. But
Hmm.
there's this one guy over here, like, I don't know, maybe to hell with it. I'll do it. I'll give it a shot. And that would be the one I book. And it's so weird
Every
because
time,
the
every
not
time,
every time, but it would happen sometimes.
it
And I was like,
happens a lot.
what is different? Well, how did I get that? I think part of it is because when you don't go into it with certain expectations, you feel like you have less to lose, so you don't stress so much about it. You
Mm,
you go into the role you go in the role kind of expecting nothing to happen. You might not get it at all, so why not just try whatever you think sticks, trusting
mm,
your instincts. Because I look at something, I don't think it'll work, but this is what I think out of the situation, the best I can offer it, and because I'm giving it the best that I could offer it, I guess it sounded right to somebody, and
mm.
trusting your own voice and your instincts will get you a long way when it comes to any audition you put yourself into.
I think trusting your instincts as just like a entertainer, as like a creative, just in general, I think is so important because you don't want to rely on other people to kind of just tell you what you should do. You want to be able to say, "This is what I think I want. This is what I want to try." And I think that's really important to have an instinct to just say to trust your have an instinct to trust your instincts. I think that's the way I'd
Yeah,
put it.
not being afraid to get creative and
Hmm.
saying like if it sounds stupid, who cares? It maybe you were usually our harshest critics anyway,
Hmm.
and in an industry where there's a lot of very drastic, very silly sounding voices, by intention, why not try something out of the ordinary?
I think that's a great way to put it. I have one final question for you, and it's a very simple one. What
Okay.
advice would you give to someone basically just starting out? Someone basically trying to take that or someone trying to take that next step. What advice would you give someone basically trying to put their foot into the world of voiceover right now?
I guess my advice, because one of the things that has helped me was keeping that creative spirit. And a voiceover for me is a medium for which for me to be creative. I'd imagine that's a reason why people got into voiceover as well, is to find that medium to be able to express. And I guess hanging on to that and bringing that with you, is extremely valuable.
Hmm.
When you go into classes, the thing you'll be told is to go to classes. Definitely get insight from professionals. Get insight from anybody that's like booking a lot, and make friends with people, not for the sake of the jobs or the opportunity, but because you like to meet people. And that's why I'm in here, is because I like meeting people,
Hmm.
and I like listening to their stories, and knowing what they like to give to the world, and what makes them brighten up. Something else, I guess that's another piece of advice I give to anybody who's going in, is just to remember that we're all people here doing the same thing. And honestly, if I had to give any advice, I think a lot of people in this industry we all don't exactly know what we're doing, and we're just kind of doing it. And
Hmm.
I think there's something very uniting about that. Like we're all very intimidated by different people, but the truth is we're all just people trying to make something happen.
Hmm.
And we're not to say faking it till you make it, but sometimes when someone's saying like I have no idea what I'm doing, don't worry, you're not alone.
Hmm.
We're all in this together. We all want to make cool stuff. Have a creative, open mind to things, and definitely seek out, um, if financially it's allowed, to seek out professionals and classes and coaches, and on your own time, study the works that get people booked. Study, if you're looking to get into cartoons, listen to a lot of cartoons. If you're looking to get into video games, listen to a lot of different kinds of video games. And commercials, just listen to ads. They're on the TV. That means they got it. And pay attention to where they enunciate, where they put emphasis, where they put brightness, where they get serious. Um, the people around us, uh, the people around us make us better in a way, because we're all part of this together, I think.
Hmm. I think being a student of voiceover is just as important as actually voice acting. If you go in, like I've talked to a few people who are like, yeah, I want to try voice acting, but I don't really know a lot about it. I'm like, well, that's a good place to start. Learn a lot about it. I think because people who think that they can just kind of go right into it are half right. You're half right. Anyone can do it, but I think it's really more about being aware of what makes voice acting different than everything else, and being respectful of the people who came before you, respecting your peers, respecting the art itself. And
Yeah,
I think that's really important. So thank you for that. I
that's
really
usually why.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And that's why I would point people to, there's the VAC forums, which have entire threads written by people in the industry on how to get started or how to make that next step. Usually, if people come to me saying, how do I become a voice actor? The first thing I do is I point them to that website, because they
Mhm.
have a lot of resources there.
I point them there or D. Bradley Baker's I want to be a voice actor website. Those are the
That's
two
another great
places.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also hoping to kind of bolster Open Mic Studios resources channel as well because I want this place to be a fun little hub for people who are just kind of getting their start. So yeah, I thank you so much for coming by. If that brings the end of my interview questions. If there's
All
anyone in the audience
right.
who has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Um, But yeah, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, so much for having me. I had a great time, and I think it's thank you for having me on the show. I wish you luck with all your other future guests, and for you to have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you. And that brings the end of the event. Thank you all so much for coming by, and we will see you next time.